Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, the 31st of May, 2025. Today is day 603. I wanted to make sure that you're aware that another humanitarian snapshot came out that's called The Edge of Erasure. It's on the Churches for Middle East Peace website. We, alongside of dozens of international aid agencies and development agencies, released the latest, number 12, of the Humanitarian Access Snapshot. It covers the period between March 26th and May 28th, 2025. In summary, the people of Gaza continue to endure the devastating consequences of Israel's indiscriminate bombing campaigns, which have compounded more than 19 months of brutal destruction. The most recent total siege imposed by Israeli authorities on the 2nd of March stripped more than 2 million people from access to food, water, fuel, and medicine, which has deepened the already catastrophic man-made humanitarian crisis. Across the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, annexation is accelerating in the illegally occupied West Bank. This includes East Jerusalem. There are violent military raids, settlement expansion, intensified demolitions, mass forced displacements, further entrenching Israel's unlawful control. These escalating violations are not isolated. They are systematic and risk the erasure of the Palestinian people. Nearly 3 months have passed since Israeli authorities imposed another total siege on Gaza on the 2nd of March. And on the 19th of May, the Israeli cabinet approved a decision to allow, quote, basic food, end quote, into Gaza. This was merely a drop in the ocean of needs. Conditions imposed by Israeli authorities continue to prevent large-scale humanitarian aid delivery. Of the small amounts of aid that have been allowed to enter into Gaza, very little has actually reached the families who most need it. In the face of systematic devastation, widespread injuries and illness, combined with the acute malnutrition, dehydration, poor sanitation, and the growing threat of waterborne illnesses, and virtually no sanitation, deaths from these intersecting conditions will accelerate and will not be prevented by token and piecemeal deliveries of food parcels under any militarized supply distribution scheme. Only a comprehensive, multi-sectorial response at scale can even start to address the overwhelming man-made humanitarian crisis. Key findings that are included in this report: of the 40 surveyed organizations that work in Gaza, 93% of them have exhausted or nearly exhausted the stocks of aid that they have inside of the strip, while miles of aid are literally being blocked from entering Gaza that are located, just on the outside. 2/3 reported have been unable to reach or to deliver services to communities in need, and 1/3 report that their staff have had injuries or deaths due to attacks by the Israeli forces. Of the 79 organizations that work in the occupied West Bank, 93% say that they have faced increased movement restrictions in the West Bank, including settler attacks, military raids that have escalated across the northern governance. This impacts their ability to be able to reach communities. 38% have reported having suspended or reduced their operations in the West Bank, and 48% report being unable to reach communities in parts of the West Bank. The quote that we included in our press release from me says that the international community must no longer turn a blind eye to the mounting atrocities and the deliberate obstruction of life-saving aid in Gaza and the West Bank. The conditions outlined in this report are not the result of a natural disaster or scarcity. They're the consequences of intentional policy choices being made by the Israeli government and being allowed by the world. Failing to act now is complicity in the collective punishment of millions. As a coalition of 36 national church denominations and organizations, CMEP remains steadfast in its advocacy for a just peace in the Holy Land and an end to all violence and occupation that fuels such humanitarian catastrophes. The Guardian today reported that the carbon footprint of Israel's war on Gaza exceeds that of many entire countries. The climate cost of the war is more than the combined 2023 emissions of Costa Rica and Estonia. The study talks about how the clearing and rebuilding of Gaza could top 31 million tons of carbon dioxide, the equivalent to that. That's how much clearing has to be done. And again, this is more than the 2023 annual combined greenhouse gases emitted by Costa Rica and Estonia. Hamas bunker fuels and rockets amount for about 3,000 tons of carbon dioxide emitted, the equivalent of just 0.2% of the total direct conflict emissions, while 50% were generated by the supply and use of weapons, tanks, and other ordinances used by the Israeli Defense Military. Those were the results of the study. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff criticized Hamas's response to the recent ceasefire proposal he put forward, saying it's totally unacceptable and only takes us backwards. Hamas says they have not rejected the proposal presented, and they add that the envoy's position shows a complete bias towards Israel. The Israeli army ordered residents of Khan Yunis, Bani Sahela, and Abbasan, covering almost all of South Gaza, to move west immediately to the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone. And police have barred dozens of activists from human rights organizations looking the occupation in the eye, that's the name of the organization, from entering a protest area near the Defense Establishment headquarters in Israel on Saturday evening. The IDF has announced the deaths of Mohammed Sinwar, who was the head of Hamas's military wing, and the Rafah Brigade commander, Mohammed Shubanai, in a strike beneath the European hospital in Gaza. The foreign minister of Israel, Gideon Sa'ar, said if France and the UK want to reach a ceasefire, pressure should be put on Hamas. And a Freedom Flotilla coalition has a boat that will sail towards the Gaza Strip tomorrow on Sunday.
Take exit 4, 70 north.
It's set to include climate activist Greta Thunberg, actor Liam Cunningham, and European politician Rima Hassan as passengers on that Freedom Flotilla coalition. Axios reported today related to Israel that Israel has blocked the Saudi-led delegation from visiting the Palestinian Authority. That was a visit that was planned for tomorrow. It included foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, and Turkey to meet with President Abbas in Ramallah. A senior Israeli official said that decision was made to block the visit. This will further exacerbate the relationship between Israel and its Arab neighbors. President Trump made bringing Saudi Arabia and other countries as a part of the Abraham Accords with Israel a top foreign policy goal, and this shows how very far away he is from accomplishing that. The diplomatic dispute underscores how isolated Israel has become internationally after 19 months of war in Gaza, and it's believed that the blocking of this delegation is a direct sign from Israel that it opposes that upcoming June summit we've been talking about at the United Nations, that's being hosted by Saudi Arabia and France and focuses on the two-state solution. France and Saudi Arabia have been pushing other countries to recognize a Palestinian state in conjunction with the conference. Earlier this week, the UAE summoned Israel's ambassador to its foreign ministry for an unusual dressing down, and an Emirati official told Axios that the meeting was extremely tough and that the ambassadors were given angry messages to take back to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yes.
You know you have a problem when the UAE calls you into the principal's office. It's not because you were tardy in class, the Emirati official said. Netanyahu's government is ardently opposed to two-state solutions. The recent approvals of thousands of new housing units in the West Bank, including 22 new settlements, is evidence of that. Violence by Israeli settlers against Palestinian civilians in the West Bank have been ongoing, with the Israeli government taking very little action, if any, to prevent it. Some members of the Israeli government give political backing to settlers involved in the attacks. I wanted to give you two calls to action as I close. There is a statement that was put out by Palestinian women called Women's Voices for Gaza, a Palestinian Christian call for justice and life. Churches for Middle East Peace and our Women's Empowerment Program, our Palestinian leadership team from NCW Rise, and women around the world are inviting you to endorse this statement. Men and women can endorse it, share it widely to amplify the voices of Palestinian women in this critical moment. Your support helps to ensure that our call for justice reaches communities worldwide who can act for an end to the starvation of Gaza. We Palestinian Christian
or Delaware Memorial Bridge.
A quote from that is, "We Palestinian Christian women from across historic Palestine, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and caregivers, raise our voices as our people in Gaza face deliberate starvation. We speak from our faith and humanity, following the prophetic voices of our ancestors in Scripture, who proclaimed God's justice in times of crisis." Finally, I'd like to call your attention to an action alert called Letters for Gaza. We're doing this in partnership with a few other organizations in a coalition, urging and mobilizing people to contact members of Congress to show support for full unrestricted humanitarian access into Gaza and the immediate halt to the bombardment of civilians. Members of Congress have the power to pressure the Trump administration to use all diplomatic tools to lift the blockade and pursue a permanent ceasefire. So I'd encourage you to engage in that action alert, Letters for Gaza. You can find more about that in our bulletin online. There's so much that we can do. So please continue in your efforts. Don't give up hope. In the name of Christ. Amen.